A decorated soldier is thrown into an island where the worst outlaws ruthlessly reign. He soon finds himself fighting for survival and freedom. Captain Robbins, an esteemed Special Forces member, gets out of marching formation and eliminates his superior with a gun. He is then sent to Leviticus, a level 6 maximum facility penitentiary. The Warden sees Robbins' outstanding military records and his successful escape from 2 maximum security penitentiaries, so he summons him to his office to show power and control. But the captain warns him not to turn his back on him again. He's thrown battered to his cell, where a fellow detainee gives him food. The anxious man informs him that they're being monitored at all times. Simultaneously, the warden listens to their conversation. That evening, they witness guards dragging another detainee. His cellmate panics, and Robbins inquires about this. The man freaks out about Absolom, saying it's a horrible place, so the captain tries to calm him down. The next day, Robbins finds his cellmate gone, and the guards bring him to the punishment room, where all the detainees watch. The warden begins his sermon regarding hoarding food. The steel pillar in the room turns, revealing the captain's battered cellmate. The warden gives his verdict of 10 lashes and electrocutes him. He hands the weapon to Robbins and commands him to finish the remaining 9 lashes. The captain refuses, so the warden points a gun at his cellmate's head, making the captain comply. Suddenly, Robbins subdues him in a headlock with the gun to his head. He releases the warden, but is beaten by the guards. Soon, Robbins is being transported in a chopper to Absolom. After being dropped off, the captain hears screams and runs into the jungle. He's immediately surrounded by armed people called the Outsiders, who attack the newcomer. He's brought to a dilapidated resort, and the inhabitants savagely rush to him. Robbins is locked up in a room and is later presented to Walter, the leader. The leader welcomes Robbins, and the captain goes along with his farce. Walter tells him that they offer aquatic activities and calls Ralph, a bulky savage, to play with him in the pool. Robbins is untied and is given a dagger, while Ralph tries to intimidate him. Suddenly, Robbins throws the dagger into his opponent's chest, ending his life. Silence engulfs the area, but Walter is amazed, so he offers the captain a job as one of his staff due to the sudden vacancy. Robin jokes if he provides health benefits, and the leader responds that the average life expectancy on the island is 6 months, aside from him, who lasts 7 years. He adds that Robbins can choose to leave, but the soldier accepts his offer to stay and jokes that he should hire a lifeguard. They all laugh, but in a flash, Robbins pushes Walter into the pool and steals his weapon. The outsiders surround him, and the leader approaches him, seething in anger for what he's done. The captain grins and grabs a spear before dashing away with the men chasing him. He soon faces several pursuers and traps set in the jungle, and despite getting injured, he manages to push forward until he gets cornered by the outsiders by the cliff. A man hits him with tribal darts and the captain falls. Fortunately, he drops into the water and drifts to shore, where the insiders rescue him. In Leviticus, the warden receives a report that Robbins is alive in the insiders' territory. Hours later, the captain awakens in a hut and heads out, seeing a more peaceful community. He tries to enter one of the huts, but Skull, the leader's assistant, and Hawkins, the chief of security, warn him to never enter that place. They escort Robbins to the father, their leader, who explains to him that they are a community of civilized individuals. Hawkins begins interrogating him, especially since he's the first to escape from Walter carrying one of their powerful weapons. But the captain claims he's not in the mood to answer them. The leader asks him to join them, but Robbins declines, stating that he wants to escape the island. The father asks Hawkins to bring him to Dysart, their inventor. He updates the head of security about his problems with the current project, and Robbins gives a clever suggestion, grabbing his attention. Hawkins introduces the captain to him and adds that the newbie is determined to escape, so Dysart brings Robbins to their makeshift tower to have a complete view of the landscape. The 2 inhabitants state how highly guarded and isolated the island is. The jungle has approximately 600 outsiders and 98 insiders. There's constant satellite surveillance and a fleet of gunships 50 miles away. Upon returning to his hut, King, the host to newcomers, nags the captain about how dangerous it is to get sick on an island where medicine is inaccessible. King gives him hygiene reminders and some salve from the father for his injured leg. Robbins asks why they call him that, and King declares it's because that's what he is to everyone here. The following day, Robbins corners Casey, who's been following him since day 1. The younger man admires the captain since he escaped from the outsiders, but he's warned to keep distance. Robbins goes to the cliffs and throws a crate into the sea to know how strong the current is, but the waves easily break it. Casey approaches him again and talks about his hometown. Then he introduces the captain to Stefano, their merchandiser, who opens a deal to take Robbins' boots when he passes away. He's interrupted by his partner, Ratman, whom he urges to leave. That evening, the captain sees a group of insiders bringing some gear somewhere, so he follows them, but Hawkins catches him and punches him. The head of security warns him that it's dangerous to roam at night and offers his hand for the newbie to stand. In a flash, Robbins returns the punch and leaves. The following day, Casey joins the captain for breakfast, and he's asked why he's there. Casey narrates his involvement in abducting children, but stresses that he was just a driver. Suddenly, the supplies chopper hovers over them, but Casey explains it drops by twice a month only for the outsiders. Then, he invites Robbins for a drink in Mr. Killian's brewery. The captain gulps the nectar and coughs terribly, commenting it can kill, upsetting the brewer. Seeing the older man's reaction, he praises it. Then, the bell rings, and they assemble by the gates. They witness a man being banished for sleeping in his post a second time. The father reminds everyone that anything they do or fail to do which can compromise the community's safety is punishable by banishment. Only Robbins remains deep in thought. The leader asks what he thinks, and the captain states that innocent lives are taken due to people who impose their beliefs of right and wrong. Meanwhile, the outlaw begins questioning Walter's authority, and one of the men openly states that they're tired of his orders. He implies that Robbins may be more capable than him, so the leader silences him. Afterward, Walter calls his right-hand man, Scab, to share his plan to conquer the insider's territory. Scab suggests asking help from gangs, but Walter has other ideas. The next day, Robin spends time alone in contemplation, and when he returns to the village that evening, Casey welcomes him to their Christmas party, where everyone is in a festive mood. Unbeknownst to them, the outsiders surround their village for an ambush. The insiders resume their celebration, and King gives Robbins a blanket as a gift, which the sulking man refuses. The father arrives to give a speech commemorating their freedom and ends it with a toast, but the captain interjects to toast for their victims, and the mood turns sour. The leader follows Robbins and sees him preparing to leave the next day. He calmly tells him that he can have a life here, and sincerely expresses his concern for the captain's survival if he chooses to be alone. Suddenly, the warning bell rings, notifying everyone of an attack. Casey asks the captain if he'll accompany him, but the older man angrily dismisses him. The insiders line up with their bows by the wall, while the outsiders hide behind the trees. The panic-stricken Casey crouches in fear, but Robbins arrives, reassuring him. The captain asks Hawkins' status and is informed that they have planted a spy among the outsiders, who notified them of the attack. Holding his crucifix in fear, King asks the captain if there's a god, but the soldier declares he's sure there's someone, but it isn't the creator. Meanwhile, the satellites pick up the concentration of people in the village perimeter, and the warden is informed. The ambush begins by stealthily eliminating the guards by the bridge, followed by a rain of flame arrows. In Leviticus, the warden tells his men to let the detainees fight. Soon, the village is on fire and their fortress is destroyed. The outsiders use this opening to infiltrate, and the skirmish begins. Simultaneously, Walter and Scab sneak in. Robin saves Stefano, while Dysart uses his invention to shoot at the enemies. The father fights with his club, and Casey almost perishes, if not for the captain. The outsiders charge toward the leader, and despite the men's protection, he's stabbed. Skull assists him to a safe place, unaware that Walter and Scab are waiting there. Fortunately, Robbins notices them and propels himself to the site as fast as he can. Scab knocks out Skull and stabs the father. Walter sings a Christmas song in mockery, unaware that Robbins has arrived. The captain grabs an axe and is about to attack, but Skull, pretending to be unconscious, signals him to wait. Walter grabs his blade, prepared to take the father's life, but Robbins opens the floor hatch Walter's standing on, making him fall. At the same time, Skull burns Scab as the brawl between the captain and Walter begins. Seeing he'll lose, Walter flees and his men follow, but they leave the territory with many casualties. Robbins checks up on Casey and reassures the younger man he did well. Then he approaches the father, who's busy helping the wounded. The leader tells him that it's a regular occurrence for them since the outsiders loot, but Robin stresses that Walter is clearly after the leader this time, so the older man tells him it's their problem to face. That evening, a funeral is held for the deceased, with Stefano mourning Ratman's demise. Watching from afar, Robin sobs silently as his tragic memories flash in his mind. Killian approaches him to offer a drink. The brewer tells him that the warden desires to see them and each other. He adds that Absolom is a secret since the public won't allow it, and that's why the security is tight. Robbins asks why the father is here, and Killian answers that the leader used to be a surgeon whose wife slept around. One day, she was found lifeless, and her husband was found guilty. However, he believes that the father is innocent. The following day, Robbins discovers that the father and the others are testing some gears to escape. The craft Dysart made crosses the border satellite, since the guard monitoring it thought the signal was just a glitch. However, another person notices the craft and dispatches 2 helicopters that fire missiles at the craft and their hideout. Robbins volunteers to ride the next craft, but the others tell him he has to earn their trust. Afterward, he enters the forbidden hut and sees Dysart and the inventions. He excitedly asks if the inventor will use these to flee, but Dysart tells him he won't leave to pay for his sins. He states that he used his talents to make a bomb for money where 50 people perished, so he needs to compensate. Robin sees a motor from a Chevy, and the inventor explains that it might be fast enough to propel the craft before getting spotted, but it doesn't work due to the missing part. Afterward, Robbins negotiates with the father to retrieve the missing part from the outsider's territory in exchange for a spot and Casey's on the next craft. The leader tells him that it's been agreed that whoever will escape shall expose the existence of Absolom, as that's the only way to escape. Robbins stands firm that he won't risk being recaptured, so either they take his deal or not. While the soldier prepares for his mission, Stefano arrives, expressing his concern regarding his safety, but in the end, he wants Robbins to sign a contract that he'll get his shoes if he dies, so he's sent out. Hawkins gives the captain a map with the safest route, and Dysart hands him a couple of Molotov cocktails. Casey insists on tagging along, worried that he won't return, so Robbins reassures him he will and sets off. Meanwhile, Walter presents the heads of the other gang's leaders and proclaims he's the strongest. As Robbins nears the camp, he hears thumps, revealing Casey. Unfortunately, he's caught in a trap, and just as the captain is about to free him, the outsiders arrive. Soon, Casey is placed in a device where one small move can cost him his life. Unbeknownst to them, Robbins has already infiltrated the area, dressed up as one of them. He silences the guards and enters a room to retrieve the missing part. Then he sees Casey as the main spectacle of Walter's entertainment. Robbins makes an explosion to distract the enemies. Then he frees Casey. However, Walter intercepts their escape. The leader pushes them into the pool to fight for entertainment. The younger man attacks the captain and tells him he must perish so that Robbins can escape. Casey deliberately jumps toward the spear his friend is holding and turns lifeless. Afterward, Walter and his men drag Robbins to a room and place him in a guillotine. Suddenly, one of the guards attacks the other and frees the captive. He removes his mask and reveals himself as Iceman, their spy. He discloses Walter's plan to attack the insiders again and urges Robbins to warn his allies. The captain returns to camp and gives the distributor to Dysart. Then he informs the father about the upcoming attack. Unfortunately, he's in terrible condition, and Hawkins and the others are fortifying the village and setting traps. However, Robbins states that they're vastly outnumbered now that Walter has gained control among all the other gangs, implying they need to escape. Hawkins angrily refutes, but the father agrees with Robbins and commands them to prepare. The captain follows Dysart and orders him to finish the craft. Hawkins confronts Robbins afterward, saying he can't abandon 13 years of his life's worth, but the soldier responds that he didn't say anything about abandoning. The following day, the evacuation begins, and Robbins discovers the father's critical Hodgkin's disease. The leader requests Robbins to lead and save the people, but the man refuses. Then the captain checks Dysart and finds the boat up and running. However, seeing the flames from the vessel, his traumatic recollection strikes again. That evening, Robbins confesses to the father about his last mission before his imprisonment, where his superior commanded him to attack a village, which is a source of bioweapons fire. Despite knowing it was wrong, he still followed the orders, only to assert his hunches afterward. His superior wanted to increase the body count since they were losing the war and sacrificed hundreds of lives. They covered it up and gave him an award. Despite his efforts to unveil the truth, no one listened, so he took his superior's life. He adds that he wants to return to expose the truth, and the father encourages him more, giving him the journal about Absolom. This time, he accepts the responsibility. The following day, Robbins heads out and sees Iceman's decapitated head. Suddenly, the outsiders, armed with their weapons, charge toward their village, so he runs inside. Meanwhile, the warden gets informed of a major attack with no thermal activities. On the other hand, the war cries become a confusing silence as the outsiders realize the village is empty. Then they laugh and celebrate upon seeing all the resources and territory in their possession. Robbins suddenly yells as he stands on a fortress. He challenges Walter, and the egoistic leader charges with his men. The captain uses the weapon he stole, blowing off the entire village due to the trap they set. Consequently, the warden gets notified of a major thermal disturbance due to the explosion, so he sends platoons and worries that others may read the commotion on the island. In the village, the insiders rush in to attack the remaining enemies. Skull assists the father to the fortress to witness their success. The father collapses, and as Skull prepares a pulley, Walter appears and stabs the assistant. The villain and Robbins face off furiously. Unfortunately, the soldier gets pushed off the fortress, leaving him hanging for dear life. Walter is about to finish him, but the weakened father pounces on him. The villain stabs him, and Robbins takes the chance to climb onto the fortress. His punches rain on Walter, who falls to his death. Afterward, Robbins announces the father's burial tomorrow and encourages the people to rebuild again. Suddenly, an explosion at the dock occurs, and upon arriving, Robbins sees the boat aflame and Dysart's lifeless body. However, he notices a crucifix on his hand. They rush to confront King, and Robbins threatens the spy. King tells them the proprietor is coming, so the captain instructs him to call the warden to change his coordinates. The spy calls him, stating that the outsiders are retreating near the landing area, so it's dangerous. Robbins and a few men who volunteered prepare to welcome their proprietor, but Hawkins holds him, inquiring about the father's last words. The captain tells him that Hawkins is entrusted with rebuilding the place, while he exposes the island to the public. Moments later, King shows up at the new coordinates, and the warden commands his pilot to pick up King. As the helicopter lands, the insiders exit their hiding place and eliminate the guards. Before the warden can do anything, Robbins catches him at gunpoint. He throws the warden off the chopper, and his allies board it, leaving King. Robbins pilots the helicopter and passes by their village to inform their men of their success. Everyone cheers in victory as they fly away, and the captain glances at the father's journal, ready to fulfill his mission. Meanwhile, King urges the warden to leave as the outsiders approach. The man refuses to move as he's in denial of the situation, insisting on waiting for the choppers. However, tribal cries echo and they realize their fate.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.